This is A Geek Leader. Hey guys, John Ryder back with episode 105 of A Geek Leader Podcast. And today on the show, we've got Kevin Kruse. It's an interesting interview. It's an interesting talk, interesting conversation. And it's also interesting how Kevin and I kind of connected. I had actually found his podcast, LEADx Podcast, where he interviews some great leaders and great people on the show. He also has a lot of solo shows where he gives tips and pieces of advice, very similar to my show, but kind of a more broader leadership perspective, I guess, not as focused on technology. However, Kevin has a technology background. But shortly after I had found his podcast and subscribed and was listening to it, I got a call from, I guess, one of his PR folks talking about his book release. He's got a new book out, and they wanted him to come on our show and talk about it. Now, Kevin is a multiple New York Times bestselling author. I had actually been gifted one of his books recently that was, that I really enjoyed, that I haven't talked about on the show before. And then he has this new book coming out. So I got a copy of it, read through it. It was a fantastic read. I also went ahead and got the audio version as well as the paperback, and went through that and just loved the book. It's called Great Leaders Have No Rules. There's lots of little tips and cool things in there. One of the things that I really liked was Kevin's idea and thoughts on to-do list. And I've always been a proponent of getting things done and being efficient on how you do things. And he talked about, don't put things on a to-do list, instead put it in your calendar. So we talked about that on the show. We also talked about some other things, including his latest project, which is a artificial intelligence driven leadership coach. It's got leadership training. If you go to, I'm a member of the site, so it's a free plug, not getting paid for this at all, but leadx.org, you can go there and sign up, and there's a AI coach called Coach Amanda. You can ask her questions. She'll give you advice to help you figure things out. There's also tons of book summaries on there. There's also leadership videos and courses, some of them really simple things like how to get past procrastination or how to figure out what your one thing is. Lots of little tips like that, how to do one-on-ones, how to slash email times, how to use your calendar effectively, tips for new managers, giving effective feedback, just lots and lots of little pieces of information that are really helpful when you're learning leadership. So I'm going to, again, give a lot of free endorsement for here. But with all that being said, check out this show with Kevin Kruse. Listen to it, enjoy it. And if you have questions, hit me and Kevin up on Twitter. I'll link that up in the show notes at ageekleader.com/leadx. All right, so today on the show, we've got Kevin Kruse. Kevin is the author of, several books, but the one I just finished reading is Great Leaders Have No Rules, and he's also the founder of LEADx. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. Thanks for having me on.
So I was so excited. I told you this just before we got on the air, but I wanted to tell you now anyway. But I was so excited to get information from Jackie about having you on the show because I had just subscribed to your podcast, and I've been listening to that. And you've had some really amazing guests on there. I really liked the episode with Michael Hyatt. I think probably because I was more interested in his productivity tools. What are some of the things that you've learned about having so many awesome guests on the LEADx podcast?
Yeah, it's a good thing to ask, because as much as I study and write about leadership and productivity, I'm always a student first. I just consider myself a student of it. And so, I've had over 100 guests, over 300 episodes, and a couple that stand out. There's a guy named Jonathan Raymond, a leadership guru and author, wrote the book called Good Authority. And he had a phrase that he taught me that I love it. He says, more Yoda, less Superman, as sort of plain wisdom for most managers. And he said that, when we get promoted into management or on up the food chain into leadership, we're chosen because we are good. We do know things. We do make good decisions. And so it's real easy when we become a manager and take over a team, and now we've got people asking us for advice and bringing their problems to us and everything else. We Superman it. We solve it. And sometimes, we are making decisions and we can move faster. But the first job of a leader is to develop your team members. And so Yoda was focused on making Luke Skywalker the hero, right? Not being the lead character, the lead hero himself. So this idea of what can we do, when people come to us with problems, when people come to us with challenges, when people are stuck in their careers or whatever, And instead of like giving them the answer, fixing the problem, go into that coach mode. Let's ask questions. Let's ask them what they would do. And it sounds like every leader, like, yeah, I know I'm supposed to do that. I'm supposed to delegate and guide them and all that. But we get so task focused. We're also crazy busy. I really love this phrase. I just kind of got to remember, like, wait, don't Superman it, or, oh, I totally Superman that. Next time I got to be more Yoda. And that's like one of my favorites. But there's all kinds of, advice along the way. I'm always learning.
I totally get that. And I'm always learning too from my guests or from, anything that I try to consume. I try to at least get 10%. If I can, understand and retain 10% of whatever comes in, I'm excited about that. And that's always good. So I wanted to get into how you got started with technology and leadership and why you focus so much on leadership. I know you've talked before in the past about some of the failures that led you into that path. And I know that's one of the questions you always ask your guests, right. What are some of your big failures? So how did your failures lead you into focusing more on leadership?
Yeah. Well, I started, I'm 52 years old now. Started my first company when I was 21. And in my 20s, I had 2 companies that I started that just crashed and burned. And, look, there's a lot of reasons why that things can go wrong and did go wrong. But looking back, one was just I was totally overworking and not in the right way. So part of it was like a productivity issue. But the biggest thing was just a lack of leadership. And at first, I didn't even think leadership mattered. It was like, I just thought I had it all figured out. I thought I was the smartest guy in the room. I thought I was going to work hard. I thought it was going to be easy. I thought about innovation and strategy and sales and marketing, but leadership was pretty far down on that list. Probably wasn't even on the list. And when I finally, that company tanked, and I finally realized, all right, I can't do this myself. I do need help and good people. The advice I got initially about management, it was that old school advice. I literally had people tell me don't get too close to your people because God forbid you got to fire them someday, or they're going to think you're playing favorites. You got to treat everybody the same. I had one guy tell me there's a lot of acting in leadership. You can never give them the bad news or the truth, because then they're going to be updating their resume and surfing for a job. You're going to lose your people. And that kind of management, maybe it worked at a certain time decades ago. It doesn't work now. And so even though I realized the value of, having great talent, I wasn't leading them the right way. And it was really only in my 3rd and 4th companies that I got some good mentoring and sort of figured it out. And when I figured out how to lead in a way that totally engages the team, then everything changed. And I found actually the more I worked on just the talent side of business, attracting great people, helping them to grow and to thrive and to achieve great stuff themselves, the better the business did. It was the less I worked on the business, in the business, the better. And so it was really a journey. It was really almost a 15-year journey for me. And because I now see leadership as a superpower, I also see it as a superpower in our personal lives. It's not just stuff you do at work. We lead others all the time, all around us. Leadership is influence. So we influence our significant others. We influence our kids. We influence our neighbors. And so I have just totally geeked out on leadership, for a while now.
Yeah, and that's kind of like the end of your book. You talk about how leadership's not really a choice. It's influence, and you have influence whether you like it or not in many different ways. And you kind of have to take that, bull by the horns and kind of move forward. And I found that out the hard way with my team when I first got into management. It was kind of one of those scenarios, like I'm sure you've heard 100 times before, where people say, "Oh, you're really good at this. Let's put you the manager of that group and those people," and it doesn't go very well, because it's 2 different jobs, it's 2 different skill sets
for sure. That's right.
And,
that's right.
Yeah, so that's how I got thrown into leadership, because I kept having people quit and couldn't hire. I'd hire people and they'd be here for 2 months and then quit, or 3 months and then quit. And I kept saying, it's because they pay more money at the banks. It's all these other things. And in reality, one day I got a mentor finally, and he was actually in sales and I was in technology, so it kind of didn't really fit the mold of what I would expect to be a leadership mentor. But after I told him, I said, yeah, I had 2 people quit this week. And he's like, He's like, why do you think that is? I was like, well, I know that they said, they got better opportunities. One of them's going to a bank. I know the banks pay more for our position. He goes, I don't think that's it. I said, oh, yeah, what do you think it is? He's like, I think it's you. And I was just like, what?
You're like, how dare you? And I think I just found a mentor.
Exactly. So once we talked about that some more and figured it out, then I dove into leadership at that point, and it's been a game changer for me for sure. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple of things in your book that I kind of I've taken to heart, and some of the things I've started doing with my team, even though it's really short right now. You mentioned to start your book, close your door. Don't have an open door policy, and to schedule that. And that's one of the problems that I found. A couple of years ago, I moved to a different role at a different company, and I'm running the entire technology department. And I started out saying, "Hey, everybody, you're always welcome in my office. Come on in." And I did find that productivity really struggled because people would always just pop in, and I didn't know what they were going to say. I didn't prepare for it, and I'm not the most extroverted person, so sometimes I don't my emotions just flood out, and when they come in unexpected, I may have a look of disgust on my face that I can't really hide sometimes. And you mentioned you should close your door and schedule meetings and schedule some time. So I did start doing walking one-on-ones. I've done one-on-ones, since I've been there, but walking one-on-ones have kind of been a game changer for me because people aren't as intimidated coming into my office. We've been able to go outside, get some fresh air, and it's kind of I found that people open up more when we're out there. What was your ideas behind having that closing your open door policy?
Yeah, well, like you said, I mean, that's the old school wisdom, have an open door policy, and the goals are noble. The idea that it facilitates communication, breaks down barriers. In theory, we can leapfrog our boss and go to their boss who has an open door. All this stuff sounds good. The obvious problem is that for the person getting interrupted, it kills your productivity. We cannot get our deep work, our strategic work, our creative work done. And I should say, this isn't just about a physical door. This day and age, even if you're in the open office environment, but you're wearing, your headphones and someone's tapping you on your shoulder, that's like interrupting. That's like an open door policy, or like getting buzzed on Slack all the time. And so the productivity hits the obvious one, but there's 2 other problems. First, Marshall Goldsmith, leadership guru, says if people are coming in over and over again without a scheduled meeting, to ask you about something, there's something else going on there. Like, did you hire the wrong person and they can't do their job? Or if you hired the right person, did you not give them the training and tools they need to do their job? Why are they bugging you? And if you did give them the right training and they're still coming in, well, maybe you don't have a culture of psychological safety where they feel like they can take ownership of an issue. They can try something and fail, and it's going to be okay. So you got to kind of wonder, all right, what's going on if they're coming through all the time? And then there was research showing that the real problem with the open door policy is it's a passive communication policy. It puts the burden on your team members to come in through your door. And about 50% of people say they will not go through and use the open door policy, even if they have a good idea, even if they have a problem, because they don't feel that it's safe. And I had, people write into me, just to your point, saying look, I want to meet my boss when my boss is ready and in the mood and prepped. I don't want to go meet my boss and have them glaring at me, like I was in the middle of something, right? So it just doesn't make sense for either side of the equation. And of course, it doesn't mean just slam your door shut. I say, close your door, open your calendar. Instead of just, hey, come on in anytime. You can either have set office hours, and whether that's 1 hour a day at the end of the day, or whether that's 7 hours a day, but you've got 1 hour, teach their own. But the idea is have it known, whatever your schedule is, or at least your preference. And I've got a real small team right now, and we're primarily remote, but it's still with Basecamp and digital, there's all these interruptions. But everybody kind of knows that we all try to protect our morning hours as the time for deep work, cognitive work. That's when our brains are strongest and at our best. And then we try to, if we're going to do meetings, we try to move them to the afternoon. So it's it's not a hard and fast rule, but if everyone's oh, shoot, we better get together for 30 minutes and meet on this, when can everybody meet? people aren't going to be looking at 8 to 12. They're going to be looking at 1 to 5. And if we're all booked up, fine, we'll do something else. But everybody kind of knows what the acceptable interruption times are.
Yeah, I think in your book you talk about that as being your create time. You have like create, collaborate, and connect. And
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's kind of when you have that time. And I found that to be very helpful for me. And even it was probably what book was it? I was reading. I want to say it was Todd Henry's Accidental Creative book, like a long time ago, where he talked about you needed to make room for those creative thoughts. So several years ago, I blocked out space on my calendar for when I want to be creative. And even if I didn't have anything to do at that point that I wanted to put in the calendar, I just put that space in there to strategically plan, to think, and to have activities, not being disturbed during that time. And I think that's a really good idea to have it just set for those morning hours so you know exactly when it is and when you're probably the most productive because you got your coffee, you're ready to go.
Right. That's right. Yeah. Well, the behavioral psychologist, Dan Ariely, they've done research and it says, listen, you've got about a 2-hour window after you've fully waken up, after the coffee kicks in, where you are cognitively at your best. For most people, that's like 8 to 10. And unfortunately, so many of us, it's like we show up at the office and what do? We open up emails and start answering stupid emails, or we start signing expense reports. And like we think we're clearing stuff out and jumping into it, but that's our brain time, So to time block the way you do is a real game changer. We can always process email, process paperwork later when, the glucose levels are deteriorating and we're a little slower.
Yeah. And I know one of the things that I really liked about that you talked about this book is to get rid of to-do list. And when you said, I think to-do lists are places where ideas go to die or tasks go to die.
Yeah, right.
I was like, absolutely. Because there's things on my to-do list that I put on there, like 6 months ago, and I'm just never going to get to it. I know I'm not. And if I was going to get to it, then I should have put it in my calendar,
That's right.
and blocked off when I was going to work on it. And I really like the idea of doing that. And I've started to do that more. And I've even communicated that out to my team because we used, project management tools with Jira and things like that to manage our tasks. And I said, look, just go ahead and put them in your calendar. Pick when you're going to do these things and just do them. And that way they'll get done and you're not going to just have this lingering to-do list that stresses you out and burdens you over time. What was it that kind of spurred you to kill the to-do list? I know you and Michael Hyatt kind of had a little bit of a disagreement, but kind of in the same sense that it has to be scheduled in order to get done. What experiences did you have in the past that you may have realized that your to-do list wasn't working for you?
Yeah, well, I wrote a book called 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management, and I interviewed over 200 entrepreneurs, self-made millionaires. I interviewed 7 self-made billionaires, including Mark Cuban and co-founders of Facebook, Airbnb. And as I was doing all these interviews, when I dove in, I just asked everybody, like, give me your number one secret to productivity, number one secret to time management. I assumed a lot of them would talk about their to-do list, prioritize it, ABC, look at it, rewrite it the night before, whatever. Nobody was talking about their to-do list. So then I started asking a follow-up, what's your advice about a to-do list, after they gave me whatever they said. And they usually would just laugh. They're like, to-do list? What are you talking about? And that's when I dove in, and the research shows 40% of what goes on a to-do list never gets done at all. It's the place where important but not urgent stuff goes to die. A big chunk of the stuff that is done on our to-do list, it's stuff we've put on it like within hours. So it'll be like, oh, wow, I need to empty the dishwasher. I'll write it on my to-do list. I go empty the dishwasher and then cross it off my to-do list because it feels so good, to strike that out.
Yeah, like Simon Sinek says, you get that dopamine hit, right?
Yeah, you get the dopamine hit. Absolutely. And so, what, not all, but I mean, almost all this, I'm not talking about just average performers or even good performers. Like if you only have 7 things you need to do in your life, you're probably going to be able to remember them. Your brain's a good tool. If you only have 10 or 12 things to do in your life, a to-do list probably is going to work, 10, 12 items. But if you've got more than that, then putting them on the calendar or putting them on a to-do list is void of importance, duration of time, priorities in terms of schedules, related deadlines. So the idea is just by pausing, like if you really want to do something, pause and say, what's the date? What's the time? What's the duration? And it doesn't guarantee you're going to get it done. I still slide stuff all around my calendar a bit, but it goes way, way up. And your ability to say no to things goes way up as well. Because now all of a sudden, if I'm just working off my to-do list and John stops by and say, hey, you want to grab coffee so I can pick your brain on Thursday? And okay, sure. Yeah, I can do that. Now when John says, hey, can I buy a cup of coffee and pick your brain sometime, just an hour? I'll say, sure, I'd like to do that. And I go to my calendar and I realize I don't have any time for coffee on the calendar for 2.5 months. So now it's like, hey, love to do it. And my first available date is 2.5 months from now, and then it's like you take it or you don't take it, but it really forces you to realize, look, time is life and it is finite, so let's invest those minutes wisely.
Yeah, and I like the way you said that, minutes, because you talked about how the most productive people count their minutes, not necessarily their hours. And that's really important to me, and that's why a lot of my meetings are 15 minutes. They're not going to be that 1 hour block that Outlook says, because they don't need to be 1 hour. And if I give it 1 hour, what are you going to do? We're going to take that whole 1 hour, and that's just a waste when we can accomplish it in 15 minutes if we have that time crunch. One of the things that you also talked about was turning off your smartphones, getting rid of those because of the distractions and all the things that happen with that. And that's one of the things that I started to take into heart. I think Cal Newport wrote a book about, minimalism and digital, turning off some of that stuff. And when I read that, I thought, what, when I get home, I'm going to turn off my smartphone and not have it at the dinner table, not answer emails. And, I had to go through the whole idea of telling my boss that, hey, if there's a problem between these hours, I'm not going to be able to find out about it, but I will later. And when I said that, I thought he's going to say, oh, that's unacceptable. But he said, oh, yeah, that's absolutely fine. You have a team that can handle that. So sure. And I think that's one of the myths that some people have, is that they need that smartphone. They need that connection. How do you combat that idea of, I have to be in touch. People have to be able to get to reach me, with people that say they can't turn off their smartphones?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get that a lot from, people in sales. Oh, I got to respond to clients right away. I get it from people in IT. Oh, what if the servers go down? That type of thing. And, what I say is, look, to each their own. The main idea is right now, psychological brain hackers are being paid a fortune by all the app companies out there and everything to interrupt us as often as possible. Because, of course, if we're on Facebook, we're on Snapchat, we're on Instagram, all that stuff, we're not the customer, we're the product. They are selling access to our brains, to our attention. And even if you're getting text messages from, or emails buzzing or whatever from friends or colleagues, do you want to interrupt the person you are trying to be connected with and communicate with? Do you want to interrupt the deep work that you're doing or the relaxing time that you're having? So it's not, I always say, look, you want to use the phone as a tool intentionally, with intent. So when I want to process email, when I want to see if any friends have gotten in touch with me or whatever it is, then I want to do it, not when it buzzes my attention. And because so many of us are addicted, I think it's a good idea to shut it off, put it on airplane mode, whatever it is, just so we're not disturbed. We're not burning brain cells up on that. Now, I think for the salespeople and all the rest, I mean, look, I'm in sales now. I've been always in sales. And there was a time when I thought speed counted a lot. So, we're going to answer that phone by the second ring, and we're going to get back to people within minutes and all this stuff. And I finally had to tell myself, wait a minute, are they buying me and the company because I return their calls in 7 minutes and the competitor returns their calls in 7 hours? Or do I have a value proposition that's maybe a little stronger than how fast I pick up their phone call or answer their email? And if you think that your clients are buying from you because of how fast you're returning emails and text messages, you better work on your strategic positioning better. That's not a very strong value proposition. And I think that, in cases where it's oh no, I'm in IT, I've got to know in case something bad happens. In my mind, the most serious profession there could possibly be, it's doctors, right? I mean, people die if they're not, there's times people die. That's even worse than a little bit. It's close, but even worse than when a server goes down. And yet that's why they have, doctors have call time. They're not looking at their beeper 24/7, 7 days a week. They spot each other. It's oh, I'm on call tonight. Okay, fine. You're working. You get to work from home and go to dinner. You're still working. That's fine. But then the next day you should be able to shut your phone off because Dr. So-and-so that's their night, right? So it's the same in IT. At work, people say oh, but what if someone, fear of missing out, FOMO, it's like, what if something happens in the company and I don't know the news? Okay, that seems ridiculous to me, but even if that is, then I'm going to say, all right, you know what, John, here's the deal. I'm going dark in the afternoon. I'm going to just shut my phone off because I got to get some work done. But if something really weird happens, come run in and tell me, like if the CEO resigns, come tell me. Like you can always just set up a buddy system or something to kind of cover each other during these dark times if you have to. But for most of us, like, look, I'm a busy entrepreneur. I'm a single dad. I got a lot of reasons to be on the phone. I can process email 3 times a day, like process it in the morning, deal with anything that happened overnight, go into deep focused work mode, pop up around, middle of the day, lunchtime, process any messages that came in. God forbid a client wanted something at 10 o'clock in the morning. It took me all of 2 hours or 3 hours to get back to them. And then I go dark in the afternoon and I try to process again at the end of the day. For most people, 1 to 3 times a day of intentional processing of phone messages should really be enough.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I think we had this myth that, you talked about having to respond. When I first took the job that I'm at right now, one of the executives that I report to, he would send me emails and I wouldn't respond right away because I would wait till those windows, because I made it a point to not check email when I got to the office until at least 10:30, because
Great.
If I did, I just got train wrecked with whatever came in my inbox, and what I wanted to do never got done. And he would say, I noticed you don't respond to me right away, but I don't have a problem with it like I thought I would. And I said, well, why is that? He's like, because when you respond, you actually answer the questions. Whereas before I would get a response like, oh, I'm looking into this. And then I would have to wait and get another response of the answer. And my inbox would get all these messages that were irrelevant. And now I get just the relevant responses. And I think it was Tim Ferriss that said, the reason why you get so much email is because you reply to so much email.
We train people how to get to us. That's for sure.
Yeah.
But John, what your listeners have to really pick up on something. You've said it a couple times, which is that you had the professional courage to basically go to your bosses and say, hey, I'm going to try to go dark at night, or, to have this recovery and family time and all that. Or I'm going to do important focused priorities early, first thing in the day. So many people say, my boss would never go for that. I'm not even going to try. My boss would never go for that. You should at least have the conversation, from a spirit of, hey, boss, because I want to make great progress tomorrow morning on your number one priority, which is X, I'm going to mute my phone from 8 to 10:30 in the morning. So again, I can make progress on things that are important to you. Is that okay? And you might be surprised. The boss will be like, yeah, sure, fine. No problem. You're working, you're busy. Do it. I've never heard anyone say, oh, I went to the boss, like you said, Kevin, and they said, no, that's stupid. You must respond to me within 5 minutes. No one's ever said that. They're usually like, I was really surprised. My boss was fine with it.
Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. And, I've been surprised with some of the things. I know when I did transition from my last company to my current company, during the interview process, I told my boss, I said, hey, by the way, I've got this podcast that I do. I would like to continue to do that. I also teach part-time at Winthrop University. So I'm going to need to leave early on Mondays to go facilitate that, but it's important for me because it keeps me in tune with what's going on in technology, what the students are learning, it also gives me a avenue for great talent that I can hire in as well. Yeah. And those are just things that I need to assurance that that's going to be okay before I accept this job. And he's like, absolutely. He's like, that's one of the reasons why we're interested in you, because you do these things.
And listen to the way you position it. And it's not BS. It's true. It's like, hey, I'm going to go do this thing and I'm going to have to leave a little early. And yet it keeps me current. It keeps me fresh. It gives me an access to some talent, similar with the podcasting and things. And smart companies, smart leaders, they want people who are the movers, the shakers, the hustlers, who are active in their industry. They don't want someone who's just going to do, the robotic work and burn out. People need to challenge up. They really need to challenge up.
Yeah, and I think transparency is clear with that, because I'm not saying, hey, I need to disappear for a few hours and not tell them what I'm doing. I'm telling them what I'm doing. And I know you talked about it in your book, how important transparency is from the leader's perspective, but I think it's important both ways, from the employees and the leaders. If we're all open and honest about things, and as long as we have good intent, I don't see that there's much of an issue. You did talk about transparency when it comes to salaries, and that's one of the things that I know you've probably gotten a lot of blowback on a lot of HR people are like, oh, no, you can't do that.
Right.
And that's one of the things that was really surprising and refreshing to me at my current role. It's not necessarily transparency about the salaries, but they did it kind of the way one of the companies in your book you talked about, where if you have a title, you're getting this salary. There's not a range for that salary or for that position. This is what it is. And that's made my job as a manager, much easier. When I hired a certain manager and, it's like, well, this is how much that manager gets paid. There's no discussion. People don't come to me and say, hey, could I get more because I feel like I'm doing more than this person? I said, well, that means you need a promotion. That means you need to, we need to redefine your job title and your role, and then go back and get that graded and figure out what that comes back to.
Yeah. That's the thing of, people think the sky's going to fall if people know what each other makes. And the first thing is like, a big chunk of the working population, this is already the way it is. If you work in federal government, everybody knows it's public information. If you work in the military, that's public information. In most states, if you're a school teacher, you can look up how much they're making, and the sky doesn't fall. And even if a company isn't like saying, this specific name is making exactly this much money, the point is you should be ready and able to have an honest, transparent conversation around, okay, this is how we pay. And there's no one right formula, right? But maybe one company is like, listen, we're going to go on to PayScale or some other salary website, and we're going to start at the 75th percentile of your title. And then we'll add 10%, if you're living in an urban area, or down 10% if you're in a low cost of living, or maybe not. Or we'll go up if you've got this certification, and we'll go down if you don't. But like, just have it thought through. Otherwise, you end up with some really unfortunate things where people come in, and because the old way of, at least probably still in a lot of places, like, well, what did you make? What are you making now? And then we'll give you 5 or 10% more. So if you were already underpaid, it becomes self-perpetuating, and you could end up with someone in the same title, same role, dramatically paid differently, and given gender bias, this becomes a self-perpetuating problem with women not making as much as men doing the same work. So the point is, like, be as transparent as possible on all that. And people will respect it. People understand it. It takes away this uncomfortable negotiating or fighting or fairness or whatever. And heck, I think anyone who's under 30 years old, they're all telling each other their salary anyway. So the cat's already out of the bag.
Yeah, or going to glassdoor.com and searching for it beforehand.
Of course.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I think that's it's kind of one of those archaic ways of doing things that people just hold on to. And another thing you talked about when it comes to doing things a little bit differently is you talked about playing favorites, and that you don't have to treat everyone the same. And when I first thought that, I thought, wow, that's kind of a radical way of thinking. But then I thought, well, is it really? Because it's kind of what we do in life anyway, right? We have our friends we hang out with, and the friends that we don't really hang out with that much.
Right. Yeah, it's playing favorites. It's different than favoritism or cronyism. We're not saying play favorites just based on, they go golfing with you, or it's a relative or something like that. It's acknowledging that in any team, there's going to be high performers and lower performers. And there's no reason why. In fact, the fastest way to lose your high performers is to treat everybody alike, pay them the same opportunities, give them all the same amount of your time. I don't do a lot of sports stuff, but like John Wooden had a great quote where every year, he'd get new basketball players, college, and he would say, listen, I'm not gonna like you all the same, but I will love you all the same. And so, you can still have this universal love and support for everybody, acknowledging that you're not going to like them all the same, and acknowledging that your star performers should be groomed as high potentials. And don't fall into the trap of like, I got 10 people, I got 10 hours this week to invest in my people, but these 2 people, they're on the wrong side of the bell curve. So I'm going to give them 8 of my hours to try to help them, to try to save them. Meanwhile, you're starving your stars. You're starving your star performers. So it's not that like the rules don't apply to them, quote unquote rules. It's just that like you should treat the star performers differently based on the context of what they're achieving.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree with that. And it's one of the things that I found with my team that I've been doing it on accident, more or less, that, there's certain people that I talk to more, that I may even, share more, I open up with them more about what's going on, but not because other people aren't asking. It's just because that person, I feel like they're taking to heart some of the things that I'm saying more. So I'm going to give them more.
That's right.
The last thing I want to talk about in your book before I get into a different topic is I really like the way you did something. At the end, you talk about how you can use this information as a parent, how you can use this information, as a sports coach, and different areas of leadership, not just, being the boss or something like that. What gave you that idea? Is that because of things that you do in your real life, or just, what gave you that idea of putting those sections in there? Because I think that's been very helpful. That was really helpful for me, because I thought, I can use that with my kids and such.
Yeah. Well, it's evolved. So a couple books ago, I started thinking about like an application section instead of just a summary, like an application section, which is a little more valuable. And then the 15 Secrets book, I did the similar thing, but not as many categories. And working with my editor, he said, listen, there's going to be all kinds of people that want to be better leaders, obviously the ones at work, but what about sports coaches? What about the military? And then to me, like the point I always am trying to make is, again, like leadership doesn't stop when you get home, and so I wanted to make sure the way the cover's written, the way the title, I doubt too many parents would be like, oh, I'm going to become a better parent by buying this book. But you would. I mean, you actually would, because the same ways that we engage and develop people at work, they're just people, it's just relationships. It's the exact same way we engage and strengthen our relationships, in our marriage, with our kids, with our friends. It's all the same.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, this is, hopefully my team members aren't listening to this part, but I've taken stuff from parenting books that I've been reading and applied them to work. I'll take a concept where it says, oh, try this with your kids. And then I said, oh, I'm going to try that with my employees.
That's right.
And it works. A lot
of overlap.
Yeah. So tell me about LEADx and what you guys are doing with the leadership program there, and how artificial intelligence, how you guys are utilizing, IBM's Watson to help people become better leaders.
Yeah. So we start with this premise that it's all about the manager. Gallup tells us that like 70% of employee engagement has to do with who your manager is. People join companies, they leave bad bosses. And yet, and so we give all this training to managers, all these assessments, but there's this knowing doing gap. And so in North America, engagement is stuck around, 33%. Most people are not engaged at work. Turnover is pretty high in most organizations. And so if training isn't working for managers, what does work? Well, behavior change is hard, but having a coach, having an actual executive coach to help you, who knows you, who can help you to set a goal, to be an accountability buddy as you work to get better in a certain area, that's what works. But coaches are expensive. So the whole idea I had, we were in stealth mode for 2 years, but it's like, all right, how do we democratize leadership? How do we democratize the coaching experience? And so we built the world's first executive coach using IBM Watson. So IBM Watson technology is the underlying tech. And it's just an app, and anybody can download the app. If there's the business version, then you have ways to feed it more knowledge about who the manager is. What's their role, what's their strengths, what's their competencies, what's their employee engagement scores, if you know that, what's their personality. And we call it Coach Amanda. It's just our branding of the AI part. But you could ask Coach Amanda questions. If you have questions like, how do I manage someone who's always late? What do I say to someone who smells bad? What do I say to someone who's dressing inappropriately at work? Whatever, those kinds of things. There's also a training mode where Coach Amanda, because she knows your personality, she'll give you guidance on, let's say, delegation. She might say, hey, John, I see your personality is high in conscientiousness, which is good. But if it strays into perfectionism, it's going to prevent you from delegating, because you're going to think you're just going to have to fix it or you can do it faster. Don't forget, John, that delegating is about developing your team members, not just saving you time. So knowing your person will give you specific advice. And then the big module is just like a human executive coach. You can pick something you want to get better at. I want to get better at giving people recognition. I want to get better at talking about vision and mission. I want to instill more trust on the team. accountability, creativity. And then with Coach Amanda, you'll pick a goal. She'll offer you a pre-written action plan, 12 things to do at work over 12 weeks. And once a week, she'll buzz you on your phone, send you a behavioral nudge or reminder, do a check-in. Hey, did you do this thing that's on your action plan? Why or why not? And it's been great. We've really only been public with it, just since late last year, so about 6 months now. And we're seeing, people love it. People are using it multiple times a week. Managers are seeing huge spikes in their manager effectiveness scores and their employee engagement scores. It's different. It's not a static online learning catalog that nobody remembers to use or can't remember the 30 clicks and passwords to get to it. It's personalized, at least to your personality and role, maybe more. It's weekly check-ins and notifications on your phone. It's the first digital tool that really changes manager and leadership behaviors.
So how would Coach Amanda learn my personality? How would she learn about some of my traits and some of the things that I struggle with that I may not even know that I struggle with? Is there any aspects where my team could offer insight to some of the things that I'm doing, to like a 360 sort of, to help out with that?
Exactly. So today, you self-identify your role, and Amanda offers you a personality assessment. IBM Watson has a personality assessment module. So you get, and it's using what's called the 5-factor model of personality, way beyond DISC or Myers-Briggs. This is what psychologists actually use, in their work. So she's going to know about personality. And then if you're using the company version of this, the enterprise version of it, we're releasing this summer a 360 and engagement survey. So you just send your team members a survey. They're going to, answer questions about various competencies. You get that report back, anonymous if you have 4 or more people. And then Amanda will either recommend one of those, developmental areas to work on, or you just look and then tell her, pick what you want to work on for the next quarter. We think every 12 weeks we could all be picking something new to try to get better at.
Wow, I think that's really cool. I never really thought about the idea of artificial intelligence being a leadership coach until I heard about LEADx, and I was like, oh, wow, that's such a great idea. I wish I would have come up with that.
Yeah. Well, we should get you an evaluation guide. We should try it out, see if you like it as a manager.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. So how can people find out more about LEADx and find out more about your book?
Sure. Anyone who wants to talk to Coach Amanda, we call her, or try out a robot coach, just go to LEADx, LEADx.org, O-R-G. There's a 7-day free trial. Anybody can just download it on their iPhone or Android device. And Great Leaders Have No Rules, available everywhere, of course, on Amazon.com. And I'm on social media. I'd love to make new friends and chat about all this stuff.
Yeah, and I'll link all that up in the show notes. It'll be at geekleader.com/LEADx. And Kevin, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been fun, John. Thank you.
Hope you guys enjoyed that episode with Kevin Kruse. And if so, please head over to iTunes, subscribe to A Geek Leader if you're not already, subscribe to LEADx Podcast as well. Check that out. And leave me a rating and review on iTunes. Even if you don't listen on iTunes, even if you listen on Stitcher or Google Play or somewhere else, I found that probably 2/3 of all my downloads come through iTunes. Probably 10% come through Overcast, and the rest are through Google products. So or Spotify, which is their analytics are totally different. So it's kind of hard to keep track of that. But anyway, to help spread the word, it's really important to get those iTunes reviews. Even if you don't use iTunes, you can still just Google A Geek Leader Podcast. iTunes is one of the first links that comes up. Click on it, leave a rating and review. It'd be awesome. I would greatly appreciate it. And also share with your friends. Take somebody else's phone, subscribe for them. Maybe they'll get some good leadership advice out of it. But anyway, email it to your friends, share with them. It'd be awesome. Our listenership has grown significantly over the last 4 or 5 months. I expect that to continue happening. And the only way we can do that, though, is to have you guys tell your friends, share, subscribe, leave ratings and reviews, all those good things. But thank you so much for all you've done. Greatly appreciate it.